Alan Ewan was a brilliant chemistry professor. May was his devoted wife and Lily was their bright piano-playing daughter. But behind the doors of their quiet suburban home, a deadly plan was forming, one that would leave two dead and expose the horrifying secret Alan was willing to kill to protect. Dr. Alan Ewan was everything a university could hope for in a professor: brilliant, charismatic, and widely published. At 45, he had a long list of accolades, a tenured position at one of Seattle's top universities, and the admiration of students who packed into his lectures. Outside of the campus, he lived in a quiet suburb filled with well-trimmed hedges and friendly neighbors who waved from their driveways. He had been married to his wife, May, for nearly 20 years, and together they had a teenage daughter named Lily, a bright and talented girl with a promising future ahead. To anyone looking in from the outside, Alan's life appeared flawless. Each morning, Alan would leave his tidy two-story house with a travel mug in one hand and a stack of notes in the other. Always in a rush, but never forgetting to kiss May goodbye. May was just as accomplished in her own right, a senior accountant known for her meticulous attention to detail and calm demeanor. The couple was well liked in the neighborhood and often hosted holiday parties that filled their home with laughter, music, and the smell of May's famous dumplings. Lily, a high school sophomore, excelled in her classes and played piano at the local youth center every weekend. She was polite, shy, and deeply loved by both parents. No one suspected that beneath this polished exterior, Alan was quietly slipping away from the family life he had spent decades building. At home, he had grown distant. Conversations with May were brief, mechanical. He spent more and more time at the university, claiming long research hours or faculty meetings. He missed dinners, forgot birthdays, and stopped joining family outings. When May asked him what was going on, he reassured her that everything was fine, just work stress, a grant proposal, or a difficult semester. She believed him. The truth was far more troubling. Alan had begun seeing someone else, a relationship that had started as mentorship but slowly turned into something more. But none of that was visible from the outside. In the neighborhood, May still smiled as she walked the dog in the evenings, and Alan still trimmed the hedges on Saturdays. Even Lily, despite sensing something was off, never imagined her father was leading a double life. She was busy with school and music competitions, and like any teenager, trusted that the adults would handle whatever was wrong. Alan understood the image he had to protect: his academic reputation, his standing in the community, his identity as a family man. All of it depended on the illusion that everything at home was still intact. And for a while, it was. He went through the motions convincingly, never raising suspicion. May's trust in him remained unshaken. Lily's admiration never faded. Friends and colleagues only saw the Alan who smiled at faculty mixers and lectured with energy and precision. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And the deeper Alan sank into his private world of lies, the more impossible it became to hold it all together. The affair began quietly, almost innocently. Clara Bennett was one of Alan Ewan's top graduate students, sharp, inquisitive, and ambitious. She stood out in a sea of students, not only because of her intellect, but because she shared Alan's passion for chemical research. Long after others had left the lab, Clara stayed behind, running experiments, reviewing data, and asking questions that intrigued Alan. He found her curiosity refreshing, her energy infectious. At first, he told himself it was professional admiration, but admiration soon gave way to something deeper, something more dangerous. They began meeting more frequently outside of class hours, first under the pretense of academic mentoring, then for coffee, then for long walks around campus. The boundaries between professor and student blurred. Clara was flattered by the attention, unaware of the storm brewing behind Alan's calm exterior. He spoke vaguely about his complicated marriage, hinting at unhappiness without giving details. Clara never pushed. She was caught up in the thrill of being noticed by someone so accomplished. Before long, the relationship turned physical. Alan, who had spent most of his life following rules and fulfilling expectations, was now breaking both. The affair gave him a sense of control, of youth, of excitement. He felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. With Clara, he could forget the responsibilities waiting at home, the routine of domestic life, the distance that had grown between him and May. What started as an escape quickly became an obsession. As their connection deepened, Clara began dreaming aloud of the future, of postdoctoral research, of moving to another city, maybe even starting a family one day. Alan didn't discourage her. In fact, he fed into the fantasy. He told her he could see that future too, one where they could live freely without secrets. But in the back of his mind, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. He was still married, he still had a daughter, and divorce was out of the question. Alan had too much to lose. A public separation would draw attention, spark questions, and possibly threaten his position at the university. May was financially savvy and legally sharp. She would fight for their assets, maybe even seek full custody of Lily. Alan's pristine image could crumble in weeks. He knew this, and it terrified him. Yet he couldn't stop seeing Clara. The more time they spent together, the more desperate he became to find a way out of his double life. It was during a late night in the lab that the idea first surfaced. A harmless thought, just a fleeting whisper. What if they weren't in the picture anymore? It disgusted him at first, but the thought kept coming back, uninvited, stronger each time. He had access to chemicals no ordinary person could get. He had the knowledge to make something appear accidental, something no one would question. It was a problem to be solved. And Alan, ever the scientist, began to plan. Alan didn't rush. He knew that precision was key. Every detail had to be carefully considered, every possibility accounted for. It started with research, hours of reading medical reports, case studies, and toxicology papers, all behind the guise of legitimate academic interest. He zeroed in on carbon monoxide. It was colorless, odorless, and deadly. In the right dose and under the right circumstances, it could kill silently. Even better, its symptoms mimicked those of a simple mechanical failure, like a faulty exhaust system. It was the perfect weapon. The challenge was delivery. He couldn't release the gas at home. Too risky. He couldn't tamper with the family car's mechanics without drawing suspicion. He needed something that would blend in, something ordinary, something no one would question. That's when he remembered the yoga ball. May had one in the garage that she occasionally used during home workouts. Lily sometimes used it too, bouncing around the living room while watching TV. A yoga ball was big enough to hold a significant amount of gas. If sealed and placed in a hot car, it could slowly leak and fill the interior with carbon monoxide. It was an unconventional idea, but that's what made it so effective. No one would suspect it. He acquired a new yoga ball under the pretense of using it for a workplace wellness initiative. Then, using equipment from the lab, he carefully filled it with compressed carbon monoxide and sealed it tightly with a specialized valve. The ball looked exactly like any other. Harmless, bright blue, and slightly deflated. Alan waited for the perfect day. He watched the weather, choosing one that would be warm enough for the gas to expand and leak naturally. He knew May planned to drive Lily to her Saturday piano lesson, then run errands afterward. That morning, he offered to load her car while she finished getting ready. He placed the yoga ball in the back seat, partially covered by a blanket. It looked like nothing more than casual clutter. Hours later, police were called to a school parking lot. May and Lily had been found unconscious in their locked car by a concerned parent. The windows were up. The engine was off. There were no signs of struggle, no external injuries. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Preliminary reports pointed to carbon monoxide poisoning, but investigators were baffled by the lack of a mechanical source. The car's exhaust system was intact and there was no evidence of tampering. The deaths were quickly labeled a tragic accident. Grief swept through the community. Friends and neighbors came in waves to leave flowers, light candles, and offer their condolences. At the memorial, Alan stood stoically beside two framed photos, accepting hugs and murmuring words of thanks. He gave a heartfelt eulogy, his voice calm and steady. No one suspected a thing. But behind his composed exterior, Alan felt something else entirely. Not guilt, not sorrow, relief. His plan had worked. He believed he was free. In the weeks following the funerals, Alan resumed his life with remarkable ease. Colleagues remarked on his resilience, praising his ability to return to work so soon after such a devastating loss. He said the structure of teaching helped him cope, that science gave him clarity in a time of chaos. But behind that explanation was a darker truth. He wasn't grieving. He was adjusting to a new life, one he had engineered with precision. He moved Clara into a furnished apartment on the outskirts of the city under the name of a colleague's research grant. He told her the timing felt right. With no family ties left, he was free to start over. Clara, still unaware of the truth, believed it was fate. Alan had framed the deaths as a freak accident, heartbreaking, tragic, but out of anyone's control. She never asked too many questions, and he never offered more than necessary. But while Alan believed he had succeeded, small cracks had begun to form. A lab technician noticed that a carbon monoxide canister had gone missing from the chemical storage records months before the incident. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but recent university audits had tightened inventory protocols. The technician flagged the irregularity during a routine check, prompting a quiet internal investigation. Meanwhile, one of Alan's colleagues, an older professor who had always found Alan's charm unsettling, grew suspicious after seeing Alan casually mention carbon monoxide properties during a seminar, speaking with unusual interest and specificity. Separately, a detective with the local police department reopened the file after receiving an anonymous tip suggesting the deaths didn't add up. It wasn't a formal inquiry, just a second look. She reviewed the autopsy reports again and noticed an odd detail: elevated levels of carbon monoxide with no apparent source inside the vehicle. The car had passed its emissions tests just months prior. If there was no engine failure, then where had the gas come from? The breakthrough came when security footage from the university lab was reviewed during the internal audit. A time-stamped clip showed Alan entering the chemical storage room late one evening, alone, after hours, and exiting with a round object that looked suspiciously like a yoga ball. Curious, the auditing team forwarded the footage to police. Detectives returned to the UN home, this time with a warrant. In Alan's garage, they found a second yoga ball, deflated and punctured. In his office drawer, they uncovered handwritten lab notes detailing gas dispersion rates, sealed container tests, and temperature-based leak models. The handwriting matched Alan's. His fingerprints were on the documents. One folder even contained a carbon monoxide handling manual, annotated with margin notes and chemical equations. Alan was called in for questioning. He remained calm, as if confident he could explain it all away. But the evidence was undeniable. What had once looked like a tragic accident was quickly becoming a calculated murder. The silence that had once protected Alan was finally beginning to speak. Alan Ewan was arrested without warning on a crisp autumn morning, just as he was leaving Clara's apartment. The news sent shockwaves through the university and the community. People struggled to reconcile the image of the brilliant, grieving professor with the cold-blooded killer described in the arrest warrant. For months he had walked among them, teaching lectures, attending meetings, and accepting condolences, all while hiding the truth. But now, everything was unraveling. At his arraignment, Alan stood emotionless as prosecutors laid out the charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was packed. Friends of May and classmates of Lily sat in stunned silence. Clara, who had believed she was building a new life with a man who had lost everything, looked shattered as she entered under subpoena to testify. Her voice trembled as she described how Alan had spoken of a fresh start, of a future together, never once revealing that future was built on blood. The prosecution's case was airtight. They presented the lab footage, the missing chemical inventory, the sealed yoga ball discovered at his home, and the handwritten notes recovered from his office. Forensic experts confirmed that the punctured yoga ball found in May's car contained trace amounts of carbon monoxide. The release valve had been expertly concealed, allowing the gas to leak slowly into the enclosed space. Medical examiners testified that both victims would have fallen unconscious within minutes, never realizing what was happening. What shocked the jury most was the motive. Alan hadn't acted out of rage or desperation. He had calculated every step, weaponizing his scientific knowledge to commit what looked like an accident. He hadn't just wanted freedom, he wanted it without consequence. A divorce would have ruined his finances, damaged his reputation, and exposed his affair. Instead, he chose silence and finality. The defense tried to argue that the deaths were unintended, that Alan had conducted an experiment that went wrong. But the jury saw through it. There was too much planning, too much effort put into erasing evidence and crafting a narrative. The notebook detailing how gas spreads in a sealed car wasn't the work of a man caught in a tragic mistake. It was the blueprint of a man who saw murder as a solution. After weeks of testimony and forensic analysis, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty on both counts. Alan Ewan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction as the sentence was read, just as he had shown no grief the day his family died. In the end, the case became a chilling reminder of how someone can wear a mask so convincingly that even those closest to them fail to see what lies beneath. Alan had been a father, a husband, a professor, but behind the titles, he had become something far more terrifying. A man willing to kill for the life he thought he deserved. The silence that once protected him had finally turned into a roar he couldn't escape.